He believed her to be the child of a stranger, until he noticed the golden bracelet on her wrist, the very one he had given to the woman he walked out on 5 years prior. The warmth of the early afternoon sun reflected off Manhattan's glass skyscrapers as Henry Carter emerged from his office with a phone held to his ear and a stylish leather portfolio secured under his arm. He perfectly embodied the image of a prosperous CEO. His custom-fit light blue suit was immaculate, his dark hair was impeccably styled, and his sharp blue eyes were keen and attentive. He walked with a sense of determination, perpetually hurried, constantly strategizing his subsequent business move. On this particular day, however, he was unready for the event that would soon shatter the meticulously structured life he had created. As he neared the street's edge, a sudden blast of wind tore through the avenue. It snatched the portfolio from his arm, ripping it open and scattering a cascade of papers into the air. Contracts, graphs, and private documents drifted like white doves over the pavement. Henry released an exasperated sigh and knelt down, attempting to gather as many sheets as possible before they were swept away completely. Then a small voice sounded next to him. "Let me help." Taken aback, he turned and saw a young girl kneeling beside him. She appeared to be no more than 5 years old. Her chestnut brown hair was styled in two lively pigtails, and her large blue eyes, nearly identical to his own, shone with resolve as she methodically collected the papers, arranging them into a tidy stack. She was dressed in a white t-shirt and a denim jumper, her small knees grazing the sidewalk as she worked with remarkable concentration and diligence. Henry blinked, momentarily disoriented. It was unusual for anyone, particularly a child, to assist him with such a simple task. He gave her a polite yet sincere thank you. The girl beamed at him, holding out the pile of papers, and at that moment he saw it. A fine gold bracelet was draped loosely on her tiny wrist, its chain catching the sunlight. Initially, it was just a shimmer, nothing noteworthy, but then his eyes fell on the charm. He gasped. It was a family heirloom, unique, with an engraving so familiar he knew it without needing to see the inscription. He had gifted that bracelet once, a long time ago, to Kate. His sense of reality wavered, the ground beneath him feeling suddenly precarious. His eyes shifted from the bracelet back to the little girl's gaze. He struggled to find words. When he finally managed to speak, his voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Where did that bracelet come from?" The girl regarded him innocently, holding up her wrist as if it were any common accessory. "It was a gift from my mommy," she stated. "She said it was my daddy's." Henry felt the breath rush from his chest. The city's noise receded into a faint drone. His hands shook as he stared at the bracelet, at the little girl clutching his documents as if it were perfectly ordinary. Then she smiled once more. "My name's Emma." The name struck him with more force than any corporate betrayal or financial loss he had ever experienced. There was a terrifying yet beautiful quality to her standing there, poised and cheerful, wholly oblivious to the turmoil she had just ignited within him. Henry remained frozen on the sidewalk, still clutching the last of the documents Emma had given him, though he had forgotten them completely. The sounds of the city surrounding him, the blare of horns, the patter of footsteps, the snippets of passing conversations melted into a far-off haze. His entire focus was on the significance of that one name, the distinct charm on that bracelet, and the little girl's guiltless voice echoing in his mind. "My mommy gave it to me. She said it belonged to my daddy." A profound tightness gripped his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Perhaps it was guilt, perhaps fear, perhaps hope. It was a tangled emotion difficult to identify. He lowered himself slightly to her eye level. "Emma Harper?" he asked cautiously, seeking confirmation. The girl affirmed with a bright smile and gestured across the street. "My mom's over there in the coffee shop. She's buying me a cookie." She radiated joy as if this were the highlight of her day, unaware that her statement had just unearthed a sealed-off section of Henry's past. His mouth felt parched, and for a moment he felt utterly unprepared for what he might discover in that cafe. It had been 5 years since he had last seen Kate. The final time they spoke, they were both weeping. She had been pleading with him to stay while he was leaving. She had revealed she was pregnant, and he had been skeptical. When she presented the test, he was stunned. The dread that seized him then was not about the child or even Kate. It was the fear he would destroy them both, just as his own father had nearly destroyed his family. He had constructed an existence founded on control, discipline, and achievement, but he lacked the knowledge of how to be vulnerable, how to be present, how to love without escaping. And so, he fled. He believed it was the correct course of action then. He thought vanishing would be kinder than remaining and transforming into the man he dreaded becoming. He immersed himself in his career, changed his contact information, relocated across town, and enveloped himself in the clamor of business and prestige to silence the memory of her voice. But she was never truly absent. Not a single day went by that he didn't think of Kate. He tried to persuade himself she had moved on, that perhaps the baby was never born, that it was all just a misunderstanding. But now Emma stood before him, a living, breathing testament to everything he had attempted to bury. The same blue eyes, the same way her chin tilted when she smiled. She was his. He stood up slowly, the papers forgotten in his grasp. His heart throbbed as he looked across the street toward the coffee shop's glass entrance. He could make out figures moving inside. He had no idea what he would say, how he would account for his actions, or if she would even acknowledge him after so much time. But he had to find out. He had to see her. Even if it was too late, even if she detested him, he had to see Kate once more. Emma skipped forward without hesitation. Confident and light-hearted, she swung open the cafe door and dashed toward a woman at the counter. Henry followed, pausing for only a moment before entering. The instant his eyes located her, the world's sounds rushed back. Kate! She was standing by the barista, her face partially turned as she peered into her handbag. Her hair was slightly longer now, styled in gentle waves rather than the straight bob she once had. She was wearing a simple blouse and jeans, not glamorous, but she possessed a quiet grace that always made people notice. When she turned at the sound of the door and saw him, their eyes met, and everything around them seemed to disappear. For a long moment, neither of them moved. It felt as if they were suspended in time, caught between the past and the present. Her lips parted slightly, her expression transitioning from confusion to recognition to utter disbelief. "Henry," she uttered, barely a whisper. He nodded, struggling to find words but failing. He had not anticipated this. Nothing could have prepared him for this. Kate's gaze naturally fell to Emma, who was already cheerfully recounting how she had helped a man outside and how he knew her name and her bracelet. Henry witnessed the instant of understanding in Kate's eyes, the moment she grasped who he was, what this signified. He took a slow step forward. "Is she mine?" he asked, his voice fractured and raw with emotion. Kate remained silent for a moment, her hand placed protectively on Emma's shoulder. Then she looked at him, truly looked at him, and said softly, "Yes, her name is Emma. She's your daughter." Henry's knees grew weak. It was everything he had once dreaded, and everything he had secretly longed to hear. Kate took a seat at a small table by the window, her fingers clutching the rim of a coffee cup she hadn't touched. Her gaze had remained fixed on Henry from the moment she understood who he was. The gravity of his presence was immense, and it felt as though the last 5 years had collapsed, unleashing a torrent of feelings she had fought so hard to suppress. Anger, sorrow, disbelief, and deep down, a spark of something she was not yet ready to acknowledge. Henry sat opposite her, clearly unsettled, his usual composed and self-assured manner gone. For the first time in years, he appeared uncertain, vulnerable. Emma was positioned beside her mother, humming softly to herself while playing with a sugar packet, blissfully ignorant of the storm brewing between the two adults. Kate kept her hand gently on her daughter's back, a grounding anchor. Henry, in contrast, looked like a man thrust into a life he never anticipated. He attempted to speak, but the words were clumsy. "Kate, I don't even know where to start." She let out a quiet, disbelieving laugh, not from amusement, but from the sheer impossibility of processing his sudden appearance after vanishing without a word 5 years ago. "Try the start," she said, her tone firm yet cold. "Or try explaining why you vanished when I needed you most." Henry leaned forward, placing his elbows on the table, his fingers intertwined as if bracing himself. "I was afraid," he confessed. "I know that's a weak excuse. I know it justifies nothing. But I panicked. When you told me you were pregnant, something inside me shattered. I kept hearing my father's voice, all the ways he let us down, how he ruined everything he touched. I believed if I stayed, I would eventually hurt you. Hurt her. I thought leaving was a way to protect you." Kate shook her head slowly, a look of bitter disbelief in her eyes. "You disappeared, Henry. No calls, no texts. You changed your number. I thought something terrible had happened to you. Then I understood nothing had happened. You simply chose to vanish." Her voice wavered slightly before she regained her composure. Henry looked down, unable to meet her gaze. "I searched for you," he said quietly. "After some time, when I began to grasp what I'd done, I went to your apartment, but it was vacant. I tried to find you, but you were gone. There was no sign of you anywhere." Kate's grip on the coffee cup tightened. "I had to move. I couldn't raise a child in a place where everything was a reminder of being abandoned. I didn't want Emma to grow up thinking she was some kind of mistake." "She's not," Henry said quickly, raising his head. His voice was now sharp, filled with regret and conviction. "She is not a mistake. I didn't know what to do back then, but I know now. I want to be in her life, if you'll allow me." Kate stared at him, her expression unreadable. A part of her wanted to shout, to ask, why now? Why, after so long, after all the tears and lonely nights, after watching Emma learn to walk and talk and grow without a father? But another part of her saw something new in Henry's eyes, something she hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. Not the rehearsed charm she once fell for. Not the ambition or pride. This was a man broken by guilt, desperate for another chance. It didn't fix anything, but it made it feel real. Emma looked up at that moment, as if sensing the change in the atmosphere. "Are you angry, Mommy?" she asked in a small voice. Kate smiled gently and stroked her daughter's hair. "No, sweetie, just surprised." Henry swallowed hard and looked at his daughter. Really looked at her. Not just the features she inherited from him, but the warmth, the lightness, the life he had missed. "Hi, Emma," he said softly. "I'm Henry. I'm your dad." Emma tilted her head, curious but not frightened. "You look like me," she observed, and Henry let out a sound that was part laugh, part sob. Kate observed the exchange with a strange, aching tightness in her chest. She was not ready to forgive. Not yet. But for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel completely alone. A storm was surely coming, but something had changed in the atmosphere, like the first bright light after days of rain. The hours that followed that initial encounter passed slowly. Kate had given Henry her number, hesitating before doing so, as if the act would unlock a door she had long since bolted. Henry didn't push for anything more that day. He didn't demand explanations or forgiveness. He simply asked if he could see Emma again. Kate's response wasn't immediate. She just gave a single nod, not from agreement, but from sheer exhaustion. The reunion had drained her, pulling her back into memories so deeply buried she sometimes forgot they were still there. In the following days, Kate maintained a quiet distance. She needed time to think, to breathe, to process the emotional avalanche that had descended upon her. For years, she had constructed a life without Henry. She had become a mother on her own. She had held 2 jobs, rocked Emma through teething nights, stayed by her side through fevers and doctor visits, and helped her learn to read and tie her shoes. She had watched Emma blossom into a curious, kind, and brilliant little girl who had never asked about her father, at least not until recently. And even then, Kate's answers were vague, stalling with gentle untruths like, "He's far away," or "It's complicated." Now she was face to face with those untruths. The man who had left her to navigate it all alone was back, seeking a place in a life that had moved on without him. The most difficult aspect was that Kate could see he was not the same man who had left 5 years ago. That Henry had been sharp, guarded, and overly confident. He hadn't known how to share his life, admit fear, or stay. But the man in the coffee shop, the one who had held Emma's hand as if it were the most fragile thing in the world, was different. He appeared older, not just in years, but emotionally. There was a rawness in his eyes, something stripped bare, as if he had been broken and reassembled during their time apart. Eventually, Kate consented to another meeting, but only in small, controlled settings. She suggested the park where she and Emma spent their Saturday mornings. He came early, bringing a bag of pastries, uncertain of Emma's preferences but hoping croissants were a safe choice. Emma ran to him with the same open-heartedness she showed everyone she trusted, and Henry seemed overwhelmed as he knelt to hug her, as if he couldn't believe it was real. At first, Kate kept her distance and watched. She observed how Henry listened when Emma chattered about her favorite cartoons, how he got down to her level and asked questions rather than giving answers, how he laughed at her silly jokes and never once glanced at his phone. These were small details, but they were significant to her. She had seen too many men move through the lives of women and children with a sense of entitlement, as if their mere presence was enough. But Henry's actions didn't seem driven by guilt alone. He appeared to genuinely relish being with Emma, to absorb every moment as if it were precious. After a few park visits, Kate allowed him to come for dinner. She was wary, but Emma had started asking about him more frequently. "When is Daddy coming again?" Or, "Can he see my new drawings?" Kate couldn't deny her daughter something that was so clearly bringing her joy, even if it frightened her to feel hope. Henry arrived with a bouquet of white daisies, which Kate had once told him she liked during a lazy afternoon years ago. She was surprised he remembered. She cooked pasta while Emma proudly displayed her bedroom, her books, and her expanding collection of stuffed animals. Henry followed her from room to room with a sort of reverence, as if he were touring a museum of missed moments. Later, while Emma was brushing her teeth, Henry and Kate sat at the kitchen table. The air was quiet, but not tense. He looked around the small apartment, the photos on the fridge, the coloring books on the floor, the gentle hum of a home that had thrived without him, and said, "You did all this by yourself." Kate didn't reply immediately. She wasn't accustomed to acknowledgement. Eventually, she looked at him and said, "I had to." Henry nodded slowly, swallowing whatever he might have said next. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry." The silence that followed was heavier, but not oppressive. It was the kind of quiet that settles when two people are learning to coexist again, cautiously, like walking on broken glass. Kate didn't forgive him that night. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she let him read Emma a bedtime story, standing in the hallway while his voice drifted through the ajar door. She watched him stumble over funny lines, heard Emma giggle, and felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But it felt like warmth. As she turned off the kitchen light later, she realized Henry hadn't just returned for Emma. He had come back to confront everything he had run from, something she never thought he would do. Whether that was enough, she didn't know. But for the first time since he left, she wasn't just a single mother surviving the aftermath of abandonment. She was a woman on the verge of something new, something terrifying, uncertain, and perhaps, just maybe, full of potential. In the weeks that followed, Henry became a constant in Emma's life. What started as cautious park meetings gradually evolved into a routine. He would pick her up from preschool once or twice a week for ice cream or spend Sunday afternoons helping her with puzzles on the living room floor. He was careful, never intrusive or presumptive, and Kate observed it all with a guarded heart, caught between wonder and apprehension as she watched her daughter slowly embrace the man who was once just a name spoken in hushed tones. Henry seemed intent on not missing another moment. He memorized Emma's favorite songs, her bedtime rituals, and her preference for sandwiches cut diagonally. He started keeping crayons and a small notepad in his briefcase for impromptu entertainment. He rearranged his schedule for school events, sat in tiny chairs at parent-teacher conferences, and even learned to braid doll hair with a seriousness that made Kate smile despite herself. Still, Kate's trust was not easily won. She often lay awake at night, wondering if she could truly believe in this new Henry. Was it real? Would it last? Or was it just a temporary display of guilt disguised as devotion? A part of her wanted to believe he had genuinely changed, that he had returned out of love, not just obligation. But another part, louder in the quiet of the night, whispered that he could disappear again just as quickly. Kate had spent too long building a life that functioned without him. She had learned to manage a tight budget, fix a leaking faucet, and soothe Emma's nighttime fears on her own. The thought of needing someone again, of depending on Henry not just as Emma's father but as a partner, was terrifying. She knew the pain of being left behind and couldn't bear to put her daughter through that a second time. One rainy Wednesday, they all found themselves at Kate's apartment for dinner. The storm had flooded the streets, thwarting their plan to meet at a diner. Henry arrived drenched, his umbrella mangled, his hair stuck to his forehead. Kate laughed, a genuine laugh, and handed him a towel instinctively. Emma was thrilled to have him there. She pulled him into the living room to show off her new cardboard rocket ship, painted in vibrant colors. Henry knelt beside her, admiring every brushstroke as if it were a masterpiece. Then, as Kate set the table, she heard Emma ask him, "Are you going to stay forever this time?" There was a pause. Kate froze in the kitchen listening. Henry didn't rush his reply. Instead, he said, "I hope so, Em. I really do." His voice broke slightly, and when Kate looked over, she saw him gently pull Emma into a hug. Her daughter leaned into him without a moment's hesitation. Later that night, after Emma was in bed, Kate found herself sitting next to Henry on the couch. The apartment was quiet. The television was off, the lights were low, and the only sound was the soft ticking of a clock. Finally, she asked, "Do you ever think about what it would have been like if you hadn't left?" Henry exhaled slowly. "Every day. I think about every birthday I missed, every morning I didn't make pancakes, every scraped knee I didn't kiss better. I can't take that back. I wish I could, but I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere." Kate looked at him for a long moment. Part of her wanted to believe him. Part of her already did. But the scar remained. "You hurt me," she said softly. "Not just by leaving, but by not even trying to come back until now." He nodded. "I know. And I'll keep showing up every day if that's what it takes. I'll earn it. I don't expect you to trust me just because I say the right things. I'm not here for a second chance with you unless you want that. I'm here because I love her and because I never stopped loving you." The words hung between them, fragile but real. Kate didn't reply right away. She looked down at her hands, then toward the hallway where Emma slept. For the first time in years, her world felt off balance, not from loss, but from the sudden possibility of healing. When she finally spoke, her voice was tired but steady. "I don't know what this is going to look like. I don't know if I can ever really trust you the way I did before." Henry nodded again. "That's okay. I'll wait as long as it takes." And somehow those words didn't feel like a promise wrapped in hope. They felt like a quiet vow that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to something that resembled a family. Spring arrived quietly that year, melting the snow and bringing soft blooms to the gray streets. By then, Henry was a regular part of Kate and Emma's life. His visits were no longer awkward interruptions, but part of a routine that had grown around them. He had learned to navigate Emma's moods, anticipating her needs for comfort or space. He even started helping with school drop-offs, a gesture Kate didn't acknowledge aloud, but noticed in the way Emma walked taller on those mornings. It was during one of these mornings that Emma invited Henry to her school's spring garden celebration. It was a yearly event of flowers, student performances, and cheerful chaos. Exactly what he had missed for years. She handed him a crumpled invitation with her name in careful block letters, and Henry held it like a treasure. He promised to be there. On the day of the celebration, the school grounds were filled with folding chairs, pastel decorations, and the scent of tulips. Henry arrived early with a small bouquet of daffodils, nervously scanning the crowd. Kate and Emma appeared a few minutes later, Emma bouncing with excitement in a white dress and a paper flower crown. When she saw Henry, she ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Kate followed, nodding a quiet hello. She wasn't cold anymore, but she maintained a certain distance. She stood beside him during the event, close enough to hear his comments, but far enough to avoid brushing arms. The celebration was messy, sweet, and full of heart. Emma's class sang a slightly off-key but charming "You Are My Sunshine," and Henry's eyes welled up. He didn't try to hide it. Kate noticed, but said nothing, tucking the image away as a quiet marker of his change. After the performances, the crowd moved to the refreshment tables. That's when it happened. As Henry stood with Emma near the juice and cookies, Kate overheard two women whispering nearby. "That's him, right? The dad who left before she was even born. 5 years. Seriously, some men don't deserve to come back." Kate tensed, turning just enough to see the women glancing toward Henry and Emma with subtle disapproval. She wanted to intervene, but before she could, she noticed Emma. Her daughter had heard it too. Emma stood completely still, her eyes wide with confusion and hurt. The brightness had drained from her face. Later in the car, Emma was unusually quiet. At home, she went straight to her room. Kate followed and found her on the edge of her bed, still wearing the flower crown. "Sweetheart," Kate said gently, "what's wrong?" Emma turned to her, her voice small. "Those ladies said Daddy didn't want me, that he left." Kate's heart broke. She took a deep breath. "They don't know the whole story," she said softly. "What matters is what you see, what you feel." Emma looked down. "Did he really leave?" Kate couldn't lie. She put her arm around Emma's shoulders. "Yes, a long time ago, before you were born. But not because of you. Never because of you." Emma was quiet. "Why did he come back?" Kate paused. "Because he realized how much he missed. Because he loves you." There was another long pause. Then Emma stood up and walked out of the room. Kate followed, uncertain. She found Henry on the couch, clearly troubled. Emma walked right up to him and climbed into his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Do you love me?" she asked, her voice muffled in his shoulder. Henry held her tightly, his eyes glistening. "More than anything, Emma." "Always? Even when I wasn't born yet?" Henry kissed the top of her head. "Even then." Kate watched from the doorway. She saw how Henry held their daughter, not just to make up for the past, but with a deep understanding of what love meant, the kind that stays when it's hard. That night, after Emma was asleep, Kate sat beside Henry. "She heard them," she said. "The other parents. She heard what they said about you." Henry nodded slowly. "I thought maybe she had. She looked different after." Kate looked at him. "You handled it well." He shook his head. "I didn't handle anything, she did." Kate didn't argue. Instead, she looked at him. "You're becoming someone she can count on. That's not something I say lightly." Henry turned to her, surprised. "Thank you." Kate gave a small, tired smile. "Don't thank me. Just keep showing up." And he did. The weeks following the garden celebration established a quiet rhythm Kate hadn't anticipated. Something had shifted, not dramatically, but with the slow, careful movement of something real taking hold. Henry didn't often mention that day, the gossiping parents, Emma's question, or the moment she had sought his reassurance. But Kate knew it had changed him. She saw it in the way he now looked at Emma with a tenderness mixed with reverence. He spoke less of what he had missed and more of what he was grateful to witness now. Her laugh, her quirks, the unique way she pronounced, "It's gefu spaghetti." Henry had stopped trying to prove himself. Perhaps that was the most significant change. Initially, he had been so focused on demonstrating his commitment it felt like a performance, but now he had settled into a role that didn't require an audience. He was simply present. He showed up. He listened. He kept his promises. When he said he would be somewhere, he was. When Emma needed something, he made an effort. And when Kate needed space, he respected it without question. One evening in early May, the three of them took a walk in the neighborhood park. The sky was a hazy lavender, and the air smelled of fresh-cut grass and lilacs. Emma rode her scooter ahead, her helmet slightly askew, calling for them to catch up. Henry walked beside Kate in comfortable silence, their hands brushing occasionally, but never quite connecting. As they passed a row of benches, Kate said suddenly, "You've changed." He looked over, surprised. "I've had to," she nodded, "but not just because of her, because of you." Henry stopped walking. Emma was out of sight, but still within earshot. He turned to face Kate. "The truth is, I was running from who I was, from everything I didn't want to become. I was terrified I'd turn into my father or hurt the people I love. But when I left, I did exactly that. I hurt you both." Kate looked at him with a weary understanding. "You did," she said steadily. "And for a long time, I didn't think I could forgive you. Not because I hated you, but because I was afraid I'd never stop waiting for you to leave again." Henry's expression faltered. Then he straightened his shoulders, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was creased and worn. He handed it to her. Kate unfolded it and saw a hand-drawn map. At the bottom was a note in uneven handwriting. "This is the way to my heart. Love, Emma." Kate stared at it, her eyes welling with tears. "She gave you this?" Henry nodded. "Last week after I fixed her robot. She said if I ever got lost again, I'd know how to find my way back." Kate laughed softly, covering her mouth. "She's something else." "She's you," Henry said without hesitation. "Your strength, your kindness, your spirit. I'm just grateful she still had room for me." There was a long pause, and then Kate stepped forward. She reached for his hand and held it. Not fleetingly this time, but with purpose, her fingers curling into his. They stood there as the light faded, their daughter's laughter echoing through the trees. It wasn't a dramatic reunion. It was simple, honest. Two broken people choosing to build something new in the quiet truth of the present. Later that night, as Henry tucked Emma into bed, she asked, "Is Mommy still mad at you?" Henry smiled. "Not mad, just healing." Emma nodded as if she understood. "Healing is like when I fall and Mommy kisses it better." He kissed her forehead. "Exactly like that." When he stepped into the hallway, Kate was waiting. She looked at him for a moment, then said quietly, "Maybe we could try again, not just for her, for us." Henry felt the breath leave his lungs. He had waited 5 years for those words, and in that moment, he understood. Redemption doesn't happen all at once. It comes in moments, in late-night talks, quiet forgiveness, and small hands drawing maps back to hearts that were never really lost. The morning of the wedding arrived with a soft light that felt sacred. It was not a grand event with towering venues or crowds of relatives. It was small, intentional, and deeply personal. Just family, a few close friends, and the promise of something reclaimed. The ceremony was held in the backyard of Kate's parents' house, a space that had witnessed Emma's growth and once served as Kate's sanctuary during her darkest days. Now, It was transformed. Kate stood by her bedroom window, her reflection framed in the glass. Her dress was simple, soft ivory, chosen for comfort rather than show. She had never been one for fairy tale weddings. Reality mattered more. Love had to be earned, proven, and weathered, and Henry had done all that. She adjusted a small gold locket holding pictures of Emma and of her and Henry at the zoo. Outside, Emma twirled in a pale blue dress, her hair in matching braids tied with white ribbons. She took her role as ring bearer very seriously, holding the satin pillow with furrowed concentration. Henry stood at the other end of the yard, looking more nervous than Kate had ever seen him. He wore a light gray suit, no tie, and a small white flower pinned to his lapel. His fidgeting wasn't about the ceremony, but about the overwhelming emotion of it all. For a man who had once run from everything, today was proof that he had stayed. The ceremony was simple. The only music was the wind in the trees, and the only vows were the ones they wrote themselves. Kate read hers first, her voice steady but emotional, thanking Henry not for being perfect, but for returning and for learning to be someone they could both trust. Henry's vows were quieter, almost whispered, his voice cracking. He spoke not of grand declarations, but of small, meaningful promises, to fix the loose cupboard door, to bring soup when she was sick, to listen, and to never again disappear, no matter how afraid he became. He vowed to choose them every single day. When it was time for the rings, Emma stepped forward carefully. She looked up at Henry and then at Kate, the enormity of the moment registering in her eyes. It wasn't just a marriage. It was a family being mended. Henry reached into his pocket and took out a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet carefully restored. It was the same one Kate had given Emma, the one Henry had seen that first day. But now new charms had been added. An E for Emma and a small silver heart with a blue stone. He handed it to Kate before turning to Emma. "This belonged to my grandmother," he said softly. "Then it was your mother's. Now it's yours. Not just because it's old or beautiful, but because it carries our story. Everything we've been through, everything we're building, this is your legacy." Emma stared at the bracelet, then let him clasp it around her wrist. She didn't speak, but looked at him with such trust that Henry nearly lost his breath. After the ceremony, there was food and laughter under string lights. Kate's father gave a toast that brought tears and laughter, and Emma ran around barefoot, her dress streaked with dirt, her cheeks flushed with joy. At one point, Kate and Henry slipped away for a moment of stillness. She leaned against his shoulder. "I didn't think this day would ever come," she said quietly. Henry kissed her temple. "Neither did I, but I never stopped hoping." And that was the truth. Theirs wasn't a story of perfect beginnings, but of second chances and the kind of love that grows stronger because of storms. They had built something strong from the ruins. As the night deepened, Emma danced among the guests, the bracelet glinting on her wrist, a golden thread tying the past to the present. She wore it not as jewelry, but as a symbol of everything her parents had fought for, lost, and found again. In that quiet, glowing night, they were not a couple who had once fallen apart. They were a family, imperfect, healing, and real, together. This story's conclusion is not just satisfying, it feels deserved. It doesn't depend on fantasy or sweeping redemption, but on the slow, often difficult process of rebuilding trust. Its power lies in its emotional honesty. There's no quick fix for abandonment, no easy forgiveness after a few kind gestures. Kate's forgiveness is gradual, and Henry doesn't demand it. Their reunion is defined by consistency, vulnerability, and a quiet dedication to doing better, not for show, but for each other and for Emma. The bracelet, once a symbol of loss, becomes a link between their past, present, and future. Giving it to Emma is more than a gesture. It's the passing of a legacy, a responsibility, and a love that has survived its greatest test. The true beauty of the ending is its imperfection. It leaves us with the sense that this family, though once fractured, is now whole, not because all problems are solved, but because they have chosen each other again, fully and honestly. It is a love story, but more than that, it's a narrative of growth, consequences, and a hope that is not just promised, but demonstrated.